You're now locked into Radio Juxtapoz, the home of contemporary art and culture conversation.
Coming up today.
For like all my career, I've wanted to do a painting of like a bunch of people insanely happy, like a group of people laughing. Like, I was like, how would I do this? I go to a comedy club. I know in India they have those laughing societies. Maybe they'd let me photograph, and I could put together a painting of like 30 people laughing uproariously. And that's what I got out of the Trump rally. I had the happiest people I'd ever met in my life.
This is Radio Juxtapoz. What were you doing back in 1979? Were you standing in line to get Michael Jackson's Off the Wall? Maybe you were striking against Thatcher's government, or maybe like me and Evan, you were still just happy wee accidents waiting to happen further down the line. Dan Witz, however, was seizing the moment, painting hummingbirds across the streets of New York in a small but poignant act of defiance. Ever since then, he's ducked and weaved his way through mediums from street-level installations to modern takes on old master techniques. Whilst it's pretty hard to pinpoint Dan's style exactly, the commitment to his craft has been a lifelong journey. Welcome back to Radio Juxtapoz, your regular prescribed dose of art, news and opinion. First and foremost, thank you for tuning in with us. As always, we massively appreciate your support, and we hope that these have helped you through at least some parts of this roller coaster year. If you do enjoy these episodes and haven't yet done so, make sure you give us a follow, a thumbs up, or whatever it is that you do with whatever platform you're currently using. We're going to get into our conversation with Dan in just a minute, but before that, Evan had a burning question he had to get off his chest.
Okay, so I have a question for you to kick this off.
Is this on air or off air?
This is on air.
Oh, shit.
Well, it's on air. Okay, so...
Oh, okay.
Do you have any pet peeves?
Oh man, that's easy. Angel wings. Seriously, angel wings. Anyone that paints angel wings, you're cancelled.
Wait, I have a question about the angel wings with you, because is it something where, like, okay, let's say you are you're in London and you see the angel wings, it makes you really upset. But I saw angel wings when I was in Beijing last summer, and it didn't offend me as much because I feel like it was being exploited in London, but in Beijing it felt fresh.
Nope, cancel them. Cancel them.
Okay. I actually hated it. I hated it there too, but I was curious.
For me, that is the number one art trope existing in the art world.
Have you studied the origins of the angel wings on the street? What do you think of the angel wings? Like, what is it? What is the person who's posing?
Oh my god, no. We really should structure these podcasts a little bit better.
What are you talking about? I came with a plan. I didn't realize. I forgot you were gonna say angel wings, but now I remember. I wonder, like, if you are somebody who's not really into street art the way that maybe we have followed it for years, and you take a picture with the angel wings, if you actually feel some sort of empowerment that I just don't understand.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Hey Evan, what's your pet peeve?
Yeah, no, actually, once I asked you, I realized that I have such a laundry list of pet peeves, as you know, because I'm a complainer, but I'm not like a debilitated complainer. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't like stop me from doing things because I'm so like, Larry Davided out in my personal life. I think for an American right now, at least in my situation, my pet peeve is vacation photos because I'm really upset that I can't do anything at all.
Other people's vacation photos.
I'm so envious. I'm so envious. That's not really a real thing because I used to just enjoy it, but right now I'm so envious of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with my my buddy here this morning about the reality of, he and I have always joked like, oh, let's get out of America, you know, like whatever, let's get out of America. Now we're like, what is the actual reality of it? Like, can we? Can we even?
Apparently, loads of people are on holiday in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, but I thought you guys were kind of gearing back up.
Yeah, I mean, we're open, but I'm like, I'll go into town, maybe to the shops.
Yeah, you're like me.
And that's about it. But yeah, I mean, it looks like people are up and about and airports are open. I got my first offer for a gig in September, international, and I'm just like, yeah, I mean, I'm into it, but like, how far do we entertain this? Because I don't know how I feel yet about traveling internationally. I've been looking at the area and it's like, it's small, it's really remote, it'd be really interesting to film in, but it's like, I don't want to just rock up like, hey, I'm Super Spreader Doug from London.
I had this conversation with the artist Justin O'Brien, which will be in the fall issue coming up. And we were talking about this, that like, you know, everyone keeps saying 2021. But like, what the fuck are dates now? Like, it doesn't matter. So as an artist, his whole thing was like, yeah, I'm just going to make work for my shows, whether people can see it or not in person. It's just, I'm just going to make the work, and I have so much time to make good work, and that's my focus. So I think that's kind of the game plan for everybody, right? Is just make the best work you can while you've got this uninterrupted time, and just see what you can do.
Which is great if your work isn't generally based on international travel.
Right. But no, my pet peeve right now is vacation photos, because I'm envious, but that's not real. It's not real. It's not like your angel wings.
Do you know what my other pet peeve is?
Yeah, what?
Jerry Saltz's take on Banksy. If you want to listen to myself and Evan discuss Jerry Saltz's take on Banksy, then we'll put that in at the end of the podcast. So, Evan, how's your relationship with Dan Witz?
Oh, so this is exciting. I'm really excited about having Dan on the podcast today, because I was speaking with Charlotte, our good friend Charlotte Pyatt, the other day, and I was asking her. She knew that I was looking for some artists that were doing some street work, but also just stuff that's about getting out to vote and kind of in America right now, and just the importance of getting registered to vote. And she was mentioning, oh, have you seen Dan Witz's project he was doing on the streets on some of the battleground states? And because it's Instagram and there's algorithms, I had not seen it. I wish that Instagram would just be a regular, straightforward application, so we could actually see when people post things. But anyway, I did a little research, talked to Dan about what he was doing in these battleground states, and it led to, let's get on the podcast and talk about his career. But what he's been doing is sort of reintroducing the story of the camps at the borders between America and Mexico, and the situation there with Trump's position on immigration, children being locked in cages, separated from their families. And so Dan kind of reintroduced that topic via street art around these battleground states, via paste ups on do not enter signs. And it just felt like it was a good time to talk to somebody who's is a painter, a street artist, a political activist, also just kind of somebody who's been in the game since the late 70s. And we haven't really talked to somebody who's gone through kind of that many stages since we talked to Ron English. So I just thought it just doesn't seem like a good time to talk to somebody who's still actively pursuing these things in America, which seems like rare and rare.
You could have Dan on at any point in the last, well, before podcasts were even a thing, and you would have had something different to talk about, like he is. And I hope he doesn't take offense to this if it makes it in. He's an underrated OG. Like, he's been there from day one.
No. We have to talk about that. Yes. Because I think he'll talk about it, but I think he went to Cooper Union in the late 70s, and I interviewed him for the Juxtapoz cover story 6-7 years ago, and he was doing like figurative street art work at the same time that like Basquiat and Herring were. So I want to talk about that stuff, because that's super cool.
We got a lot of ground to cover in this one. Let's get into it.
Dan, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any pet peeves?
Yeah, of course. Doesn't everyone?
Yeah, okay, so Doug has a particular one. He doesn't like angel wings, like street art angel wings.
Oh, yeah. Do I have any pet peeves about street art?
Ooh, it was originally an open question, but I like the street art angle. Let's go for that.
Yeah, I do, but my persona that I project is like everything is great. I don't particularly have a problem with the wings. You know what? I seriously, between us, off the record, I don't like it when people sign their names to their stuff, or have a logo or something that they're seems like they're promoting themselves.
Ooh, the Instagram handle on the wall. That's the kicker.
Wait a minute. Why is that off the record? That's not that bad.
Well, because like seriously, my policy is everything's good, because like I used to just judge the shit out of everyone. And then I got older and I realized I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I would have judged myself for now. So I just have a policy of not doing it anymore. So
wait, what is 2020 Dan Witz? What are you thinking? What is it that you're doing now that your college, your art school days would have been critiquing?
Maybe a focus on financial survival. So I used to, like if I saw an artist, reproducing their sort of, name brand product, in their signature name brand style, or, certain shade of puce that they were known for, I would judge them for that. But as we all know, researches show we all got to fucking do that. This is a survival game. So, it doesn't surprise me to hear that people like Titian or Caravaggio would paint the same painting over for another collector, something like that. Or they do, the Rubens would do copies of his own work and have his workshop do it. Stuff that I would have judged on them for back then. I mean, I don't do stuff like that exactly, but I am practical, and I have a long game going, which when you're young you don't have at all.
So was it that it kind of felt that this was the right time in culture, that culture had moved, whereas maybe 15, 20 years ago, it just wasn't that accepted?
Well, but you have to remember that I am older. I started out in that kind of Warhol sellout, selling out is a good thing, 1980s, where that was the culture I came up in. And I guess I tried a little bit to, to be part of that and to, curry favor with the right people and get in the right networks and all that. But the truth of the matter was, back then, I love this. It's from The Simpsons. I just saw this recently. It's on one of those Simpsons Halloween things, and he's in the library and he takes out a book. It's Selling Your Soul in a Buyer's Market. So that's what it was. That was the deal back then. So it didn't work anyway too well. So that was an easy thing to rebel against.
I was talking with Evan before, and there's like so many different avenues of your history that we want to go into. But since we're in this period, in the 80s in New York, one of the most romanticized period in the history of art. Let's talk about that for a minute. What was it like for you?
Well, I can't romanticize it too much, because this was like before we had antidepressants, and before bad behavior was back then. Bad behavior was almost rewarded. There was all these sort of selfish people who are right now, like you think about it, like you're like, that fucking dude was on the spectrum. Like, but nobody acts like that. Some guy with Asperger's gets all the squeaky wheel getting all the grease. So there was a lot of bad behavior then, a lot of selfishness, a lot of just horrible sort of characters who were thriving and making the world unpleasant, which is not the way I find it to be so much today. So there was that. There was all, but the thing that I would say about it was I don't remember thinking much about money or survival or I need this. I didn't feel deprived of anything. I lived a very, close to the bone kind of Lower East Side, down and dirty life. But I don't remember worrying much about even the rent, which was probably not an easy thing. I mean, I did worry about it all the time, but everyone was just doing a life hack there, a life hack there. You didn't have a computer, you didn't have a cell phone. I had a I didn't even like take subway or cabs. I had an old motorcycle, which cost me nothing. So like there was never this kind of concern with survival on that level. That seems to obsess people today. I have friends in their 20s and 30s, and just to live here in New York is so hard. Requires so much sacrifice. So that was a good thing about it. It was cheap, and the other good thing about it was you didn't really think about success too much, especially when I was in bands back then. That really wasn't the idea. There was no success. No one was going to give anyone a record contract or anything like that. A few people, would get these small deals. So that was not the idea. It was truly experimental and truly, an open, free kind of forum where people weren't competing for, money the way they are. It seems to be, especially when the 80s and 90s got going. That became more of the, story. So that I do romanticize that a little bit, because it gave me like out of art school, I had like 10 years to develop without having to, lock down into my signature style or have my particular shade of puce that everyone had to, get from me, or else they wouldn't buy my shit. So I got to try a lot of stuff. And frankly, I got in the habit of trying new stuff all the time, and I have not really let go of that, to my detriment, I suppose. But a lot more interesting to be in my studio than if I had to, supply art collectors with the same thing every year.
This is interesting in terms of the timeline, because you are in art school when I think it was like Neo-Expressionism, whatever was becoming popular, and you were a figurative guy. You were also kind of a punk guy as hip hop was beginning to emerge. And that was connecting to graffiti and street art. Talk about like where your peers were headed and where you were headed kind of in that late 70s, early 80s time frame.
There was a lot of conflict because back then there was not a pluralism. You had, it was expected that this was what was happening and that's what you were going to do. And if you didn't do that, you were just out of the conversation. As you said, it was a type of Impressionism. Julian Schnabel and those guys were coming up, a bunch of German people. And I didn't really relate to it very much. It was also the part of, the art world where it was the 80s and greed and things started to get all about big numbers and auction and all that stuff. So I didn't really relate to that. And I was coming out of the punk scene, but I think by late 80s I was done with bands and such, but I came out of that culture which did not respect success at all. It was if you were successful, you were a sellout. If you were a sellout, you were a poser. And this is stuff that took me a long time to sort of sort out myself. And I, brought a lot of punk attitudes into my grown-up life, which have been good for me and helpful, but it's also been something I've had to shake a little bit. This sort of judgmentalism and, black and white thinking and such like that. So I've progressed past that, but it did stay with me for a long time. And because back then, I was a realist painter, so that was just the worst thing you could be. Yeah. That was like you were, Norman Rockwell at a party of German anarchists or something. They didn't know what to make of me. And I understood that it wasn't cool, but I felt the challenge to do something relevant with realist painting, to be able to reproduce something in a three-dimensional way, or even actually to take something that was pretty. That was a very seditious idea, to use beauty as a art strategy. So what I ended up doing, all that sort of came together, and I started painting hummingbirds outside. It was like 78 or 79. So on the street, I would paint a hummingbird very realistically, little tiny brushes, and spend a lot of time on it. And it would be on a sort of industrial New York City wall space, and I take nice photographs of it. So that sort of coalesced my whole attitude, my whole sort of rebellion against these 10-foot paintings that were done in 10 minutes.
So was there anybody else even making an attempt to do anything realist on the street at that time, or was it kind of like you were in your own avenue?
Yeah, I think that was my shtick. Yeah, you know.
I didn't say shtick. Shtick has a negative connotation.
No, I this is my thing. This is what we're talking about. These artists get their shtick, and then they got to shtick to it, right? You know, that's my shtick, and I'm sticking to it. So I got stuck in the hummingbird rut there for like 3 or 4 years, and I realized that I was going to be the hummingbird guy unless I stopped painting hummingbirds, which I did. I didn't paint them for like 25 years, and I started about 5 years ago, and I still love doing them. So that was my rebellion, you know, because that was part of my training. You know, it was that you had to rebel against the status quo to find your niche and all that. And frankly, I didn't much care for what was going on anyway. So that was my, you know, attack on the art of the time.
If someone says to me Shepherd Fairey, I can picture that artwork immediately. If someone says to me Tristan Eaton, I can picture that artwork immediately. If someone says to me Dan Witz, well, it could be the hummingbirds, it could be the mosh pits, it could be the kids in cages. There's so many different identities to Dan Witz. And I'm wondering if this was like a conscious decision that you made to try and like to not be a brand, or to because you were bored of something, or because you wanted to kind of go against the grain a little bit. Like, what was it?
Probably all those things, but it was not an intentional strategy, you know, to subvert my success so much. You know, I know that I don't do well when I'm successful. It's a practical statement. I don't thrive when I'm doing well. I thrive better when my creativity flows better when I'm just sort of lost and in a hole and trying something new and, you know, failing and sort of beating my head against the wall and, you know, at the 11th hour of like, I've just wasted a year of my life. Somehow that works out for me. But, you know, being successful and having a brand that everyone wants, it just makes me crazy, you know, and some part of me will sabotage it. And it may be that punk rock stuff that got installed really deep, really young, you know, that sort of rebellion bullshit. But that has been the story for me, you know, all through. So yeah, I know people have trouble with me on that level, you know, like, what does he do? Like, what's he doing now? Or like, what is this guy? But, you know, I can't say that compared to the you know, the sort of beauty of my life, which I really, you know, enjoy getting up in the morning, going to the studio and being like, oh my God, what's going on here? You know, I love that. I'm in the middle of a painting now that's just killing me. And I'm like, yeah, I wish I knew what I was doing. That would have been a much better day I just had. Like, I still don't even know how to paint flesh, to be honest with you. Like, I'm still trying to figure that out. You think by my age I would know something about
Really?
Real, totally, absolutely. Every time I do it, I'm like, what? How do?
Yeah, I'm calling bullshit on that, Dan.
Yeah, I am too.
You want me to take you in the other room and show you? Because I do not know what I'm doing. Like, I've started a whole new...
Wait, you posted something recently. It was from 2014. It was the black dude in the orange pants.
Yeah. I've been.
Tell me you can't paint flesh.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun doing different shades of flesh lately, which has been something that's rescued me from those white guys in the mosh pits, because, you know, like, that should be my brand and probably, you know, maybe is, but I just can't do it much anymore. I will every couple of years, but, you know, white guys with tattoos with shaved heads, forget it. You know, I need some variation. So I've been lucky enough to, a friend of mine ran a club which had people of color in it, which just rescued me from, you know, having to do another crowd scene full of white people. I know it probably should tag into some of the Black Lives Matter stuff like that, but I don't really think that way. I mean, I'm involved in all those things. I'm thinking about it, but that's not why I'm painting people of color. It's just because in the painting, there's a spectrum of value on flesh, which is so much more interesting to compose with.
That's interesting. Did you feel pressure in any way during that sort of uprising to position yourself in a certain way?
No, because I didn't. I mean, I've done so many different shades of color of people over the past 10 years at least that it didn't even occur to me, you know, to try to do something like that, because it wasn't it wasn't on my, I mean, I'm like a year behind my ideas. I'd done all those things for Amnesty International, which were the political prisoners, most of which were people of color. That's what that painting came from, the Prisoner series. So, I've been up and down that many times already.
I think a lot of people kind of went through that moment though, where it was like, shit, oh, here's the person of color I painted back in 2006.
Yeah, it's part of the social media, like thinking problems we all have.
It's like, oh, everyone else has posted the black square, so I'll post the black square now, so I'm good. It's like, follow these preset rules. I don't know, maybe this is a different conversation. We've gone off on a tangent.
Well, it's such an interesting conversation though, because like we don't know shit about it, so we're all basically listening now for the first time, I think. Like all of us, here's three white guys, we're just like listening, like right. Tell us.
Yeah, this is just what the audiences have been screaming for. Three white guys on a podcast.
We already know. We know.
I get to be, I'm not just the white guy, I'm the old guy now, which is a nice sort of tag on me. Oh.
What was your first success in the art world, capital A art world, or whatever this world is? And what did it look like, and what was it? And then where were you at in your head, since you say you didn't do well with success? What did you do after?
I've cycled through like 20 periods, I guess, and I feel those hummingbirds were fairly successful. I mean, not financially, although a book was made and I got a grant from the NEA and stuff like that. So that was considered a success. And then, I was in all those bands for a long time after that, which sort of very easily transitioned into that East Village scene in New York, which is mostly shows in nightclubs at night. Like the nightclubs had art shows and the bands would play, and then I put my paintings, and I ended up getting into before the East Village scene, which was a big deal here in the mid 80s. So I had some success there. Was in some very cool galleries and parts of some good shows and stuff like that, and definitely started supporting myself in that marginal minimal way around then. That all crashed with the stock market in 87. On my 30th birthday, that was the stock market crash, Black Monday, October 19th, 1987. I had like a little walk in the wilderness period after that, which is like almost cliche artist, lost artist. So there was the dark ages back then, it's such a cliche that I don't even like to talk about it. Part of like every, like mediocre artist story, but there was a motorcycle crash, which, it sounds like, there's more than Bob Dylan.
It's going to say it's your Bob Dylan moment.
Yeah. So there was that and somewhere in the early 90s, and then I reemerged after that. And, I had some addiction problems, stuff like that, another cliche I don't really want to get into, but it reemerged with like, what the fuck do I want to do? And like, what makes me happy? What works for me? What has got no bullshit on? And immediately I went out and started doing street art as soon as I could get myself, moving around, and after I was physically recovered from the crash. And that's when I really started doing street art, was in probably like 93, 94. And then I just was doing hundreds of pieces a year, all sorts of strange things. I did those hoodies. That was one of those black hoodie pieces. That was, I guess you'd say, some success, got a lot of attention. And, it was back then, like, people didn't really care about street art or know about street art or want to even really hear about it, because it seemed like some fringe crazy guy who couldn't get into a gallery was just doing it. I was getting so much out of it. I was doing these stickers with airbrush. I was traveling all around Brooklyn and strange places, and just like having such a great time before anyone really knew what it was. That was, to me, like one of the most successful phases of my career. Probably not, I didn't get any attention from galleries or media. There was a couple shows, but it was like a rebirth for me.
Who are the peers at this point? Did you have peers? Like, was there contemporaries that were doing stuff like this? Because I'm having a hard time thinking of that early 90s period, mid 90s period in New York. Like, who would have been doing anything similar to what you're doing? I could think of lots of graffiti people, and some experiments in graffiti, but what you were doing seemed unique for the time.
Well, I mean, I had peers back in the 80s. There was there's definitely the punk band poster people. Punk bands had very innovative wheat paste poster campaigns. There was, those people like Jenny Holzer who would put up her weird sayings that I never really understood but appreciated. Those like Keith Haring, I guess you could, bring him into that in the 80s and all that, although his success was one of the things that drove me more underground, you might say. But in the 90s, I don't really recall much. I'm sure there was some, but it wasn't of interest to me anyway. I wasn't thinking of it as being part of anything other than, this great discovery of how cool it was to make art that you couldn't own. Like that sort of set my mind free. If you couldn't own something, if you couldn't buy it, if you could just put it up anywhere, and that was its meaning. I thought that was the most revolutionary art statement you can make about anything. So I was so fascinated by just that it didn't really hook into what anyone else was doing at all. Of course, we didn't have an internet or anything like that. So how would I, maybe who would even write about such a thing back then, right?
Yeah, has the Mosh Pit painting started it? What are they in the conversation?
I think that was late 90s. The Mosh Pits really started. I was doing figurative painting. I'd really gone back to that, looking into classical academic realism stuff. I'd gone back to that in the late 90s too, and then came into the figurative paintings, and then probably my first Mosh Pit was around, I think it says 2000, but I probably started at 1998, 99, and and that was really a consequence of me wanting to bring some of the authenticity and feeling and intensity of being on stage and performing into my painting life, because painting without the sort of risk and adrenaline of street art, and the sort of high stakes running around, police and all that stuff, just painting in a studio wasn't really cutting it for me. I needed more at stake. So I'd go to these shows, and especially in the beginning, they were little shows, like ABC No Real, places like that, a little tiny room, and really have to be in the center of a very dedicated group of insane people. So it was enough for me to sustain making a painting that would take 6 months or so to do. So and I, as far as where I was showing and all that, there were shows, but nothing very successful. I've always sold okay, but not great. So maybe about a third of what I did. And back in the 90s, it was still living in Manhattan in my huge loft, which I partitioned out to a bunch of people. So I don't think I had much of an overhead per se. I really wasn't focused on a career at all, success, like that in the form that you're thinking. And how I survived is still a mystery to me. I don't know. I seriously, I was trying to think about that. I'm I just got it together every month, one way or another, kind of like the way I do now, but without the stakes I have now because I have kids and stuff like that. Like I said, it was kind of a walk in the wilderness time until I landed back here fully formed in my studio with piles of street art I'd already done and several series of street art I've already done. And then by the time the internet came up with the Wooster Collective and all those people, I was on the ground running already, all over the place.
Do you ever feel that the punk side of this street art and graffiti scene was underdocumented? Because like Evan said earlier, if you look at the primary focus was on the hip hop scene in New York at this time.
Well, I mean, what I was doing came out of who I was, which was kind of it wasn't really a punk thing. It was a downtown hybrid punk thing. So it was a little more pretentious and a little more, self-involved than the sort of, safety pin through the nose, Mohawk people. It had a, kind of more art school pedigree about it. So everything I did came out of that. So whatever I painted, whatever I was doing at the time, like say hummingbirds or say those hoodie guys or whatever was coming out of me came out of my sort of rebellion aesthetic that I define myself. So, there's not a lot of documentation actually of most of it because I didn't really think about it that much. I do remember thinking that taking a nice photograph is not cool. I mean, these things are not about the photograph. These are about seeing them on the street, without knowing who did them, right? Or not knowing anything about them, not, being totally surprised by it. So that's another reason why I kept changing what I did was because, once you see a hummingbird, you're going, what's that guy? What's his name? Whatever. So that sort of takes some of the power out of it. So if it's something else you've never seen before, you don't know who did it. I think that gives it a lot more power. I enjoy that kind of. It's a perverse dynamic for an artist because, it doesn't really advance your cause, but I really enjoy perverse dynamics like that, obviously. I don't know if it's self-sabotage. I think it's a type of, how would you say it? It's a type of sort of hard-ass artist identity, like it's sort of like an uncompromising, maybe it's a lot, that bullshit no sellout thing, that anti-Warhol thing. But, it's like what is the purest, most effective, strongest expression of what I'm talking about? It's something that's totally anonymous, that can't be bought, that can't be sold. It's not about advancing me or getting my ego or any gain to me. The power in the piece. It's just like, what the fuck is that? Why did someone do that? Maybe eighth question is, who did that? And we'll never know anyway, right? I really enjoyed that as a, you got to realize I'm thinking like, what's my contribution to the cultural conversation here? What am I doing? I'm trying to make art that destroys all the art that comes before me. That sounds totally pretentious, and I would have gladly told you that 30 years ago. And like I said, I don't really talk like that now. But that's really the point. It's like, why do anything if it's just another cog in the machine of the art world? So I really thought that we're going to destroy everything and rebuild it, and and then around 2000 when the internet happened, everyone started doing it. I was like, wow, maybe this is happening, or like, what is happening? So
I'm curious about something, Dan, and I don't know why I haven't asked you this before, but there's something about like adrenaline in your work, and the adrenaline that you've kind of gone through in your career. Like as a musician, there's obviously the adrenaline of being on stage and playing the music that you were playing. There's also the adrenaline of documenting mosh pits and being in the center of it, the energy and the chaos that you can't replicate. I get, in certain ways. But then you did hummingbirds, and then you have a studio practice of painting, which are the opposite of adrenaline.
Well, so for everything I do, I have to go out and get photographs. I work for my own photographs. So, right. I mean, any painting I do requires this I have to embed myself in these subcultures, and it's crazy usually to be in these rave things I did years ago, and I just did that whole thing with the Trump people. That was scary, really. The lengths I had to go through to embed myself in the Trump rallies. So that was very adrenalizing. And this summer I've been doing these Is It Safe pieces in these little cities.
Right.
State capital. So that, that's it. It is not easy to be doing street art in like Columbus, Ohio, because people,
right.
So there is always some risk in what I'm doing.
No, I get that, but how do you avoid having too much adrenaline or anxiety when you're in the studio putting these things together after being in such a high tension environment? Is there something that you find rhythmic and soothing about putting that stuff together, or are you still full of that adrenaline when you're in the studio?
Well, I will say that when I make my paintings from the photographs, I am expressing the moment I was in. So yeah, it is like I am in the drama of where I was. And actually I can bring that into the painting too. And even though the painting takes 6 months to do and doesn't, it's every day, I'm sitting there for 3 hours, in a chair. There is that does persist through the creation of it. But there is a point too where there's a balance, and I think this is what you're asking me, because I will go out in the world and run around and be ragged, crazy, doing street art or photographing these things I'm doing, and then I'll come home and I'll be fucking sick of it. I'll be like, that was bullshit, man. I'm like, this last trip I was in, I got chased by these cops. What was it? Lance? I don't know. It was nuts because my wife was like driving the car and she's like, all right, I'm going to pull around the corner. And I'm like, all right, just pull on the right. I'm going to open the back door. And this guy was like running after me. I'm like, this is my life. This happened. So I would like open the door, throw the ladder, and I have one of those collapsing ladders, and she peels out. So that was my life. And I was like, all right, that was up. I'm going to go home, organize my pictures, and then I'm going to start working on some paintings, right? Because that's a part of this I hate, where I have to like organize all this stuff and make a pile of a presentation. And then I'll relax, I'll stay home, I'll play tennis, I'll be in my studio, and that's great for a couple of weeks until I'm like, this is bullshit, man. I'm restless again, right? So I have baked into what I do, like I'm going to do this other street art project, the next week or two. Actually, I've been avoiding it because I'm scared of it. There's a lot of fear involved. But so it's a balance. And it used to be I'd be crazy in the summer and then work all winter in the studio, but now I have so many options. I can go back and forth all year.
Something I was interested in is if you're talking about, say, something like one of your high energy mosh pit style paintings. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the mosh pit, but if it's one of those ones where it's close up in the moment, or at least it feels like it's in the moment. I know it's a composition of like loads of different people. Are you trying to show a different energy from these places, or is it all supposed to kind of frenzy into the same collective energy? So there's no difference between a mosh pit or a Trump rally or a Ghanaian barbecue or whatever it might be.
I like that question because I don't really know. That's interesting.
Happens once every 40 episodes. Well,
because what you're saying is, and you're pointing out something that I understand, is that they do kind of meld into each other in a way. There is that. So that is interesting. So they're all actually one painting in a way. And I look at them as like action. That's my fancy word for them. And so in that way, they all are Pollock's paintings, strip paintings. They could be de Kooning paintings, something like that, which all link to each other in those guys' work. So yeah, I see that in my own stuff as well. And I think maybe the nuances of it, the people of color, the Trump guys in their red hats or whatever, is just to keep me interested, So maybe Pollock would do that too. He'd get some, silver radiator paint, and that would be like, wow, for him. But for us, it'd be like, yeah, that looks like one of them. Yeah, maybe that is part.
What drew you to the Trump rallies, if you don't mind me asking? The obvious, or is it something that you felt like, kind of going into what Doug was saying, is there an innate mob mentality or crowd mentality that you thought you could capture that fit your kind of aesthetic?
That's exactly what I thought. Okay, let me see what this is. I think this is going to have some version of energy to it that will be interesting to make a painting out of it. And I expected sort of anger or a more kind of obstreperous, sharply angled sort of Baroque world I would be entering. For like all my career, I've wanted to do a painting of like a bunch of people insanely happy, just like a group of people laughing. How would I do this? Like a comedy club. I know in India they have those laughing societies. Maybe they'd let me photograph, and I could put together a painting of like 30 people laughing uproariously. And that's what I got out of the Trump. I had the happiest people I'd ever met in my life. So I got, like maybe 300 pictures of people who were, going to meet their idol, Messiah. They were so happy. So I put that together and made one of my the EDC paintings, with the people at the raves. I made one of those paintings out of that. It's a problematic painting. I posted a like just a video, and some people are like, "I hate you." I'm
People
like,
love that.
"Fuck you." Yeah, I'm like, wait a second. Like, really? This is like, it seems like such a measured, careful, non-polemic. Obviously, I don't like Trump, but it's such a problem. I'm not sure how to even release the pain. So, I don't want to get on anyone's list.
Oh, you're punk, man. You just do it and watch it burn. You just set fire to everything. Let it go.
I that's the type of thing though that'll follow me places that I don't like,
That's a good observation, Dan, and it's interesting that you captured that. It's because I think of Trump rallies as these angry, full of hate, but they're actually kind of like tailgating parties for NFL football games, like where these people are actually so stoked to be where they are, even no matter all the contradictory feelings they have about actually what their sort of non-nuanced view of what they're actually doing. And if you call them out on the smallest little thing, they can't answer it. But they're so happy to be there. And and that's the part where I think the left struggles with, because they're dealing with people who are not as angry as you think. They're actually really happy. That's scary to me.
I think the painting would not work. Like, I really struggled the whole pandemic. I was working on this Trump rally painting.
Just wow, you're really doubling up the depression there.
No, it was perfect. It was like a coping mechanism, for sure, for me. And it was such a dark challenge to me to make this thing work, because it has these levels and subtext to it, that have to be balanced. And what I ended up doing was and I look at the painting now, and it's like, everyone has those red hats, right? And each person has a different Trump, paraphernalia statement. Women for Trump, and they all have red, white, and blue ties, and all this crazy stuff. So I ended up making this really beautiful painting to me, color, composition, these beaming, happy faces. I made it as beautiful as I could. I gave in to every sort of self-indulgent impulse to make it a beautiful painting, and that's where I'm going to leave it. And yeah, I'll see what happens. I'm worried about it, and it's going to come out. It's coming out before the election. I'm showing it in Paris at the Urban Art Fair, so see what happens.
I don't know if that's one of those ones that you want to wait till after the election to show. Maybe but then it'll have a different meaning, perhaps.
I just gotta go before. Yeah. No, I didn't even really want to do the Urban Art Fair, but I was like, well, if I could show the Trump painting and my other, like the guy in the jumpsuit, that's going to go with it. The Black Lives Matter guy. And I'm doing the Civil War cosplay people on this another series. If I show all that with the Trump painting, maybe it'll make people realize that it's not a polemic at all.
I was interested just in that sort of thread of these kind of these chaotic scenes, and going through the period that we've gone through, which has been a complete period of isolation. Has it changed the way that you feel about looking at your paintings? And do you think it will change the way the audiences look at these paintings? Because you're seeing these moments of pure physical contact, and suddenly we're in a period where there's no touching. Don't come near my space. Do you think people have a different, or do you have a different feeling, and do you think the audience might receive these in a different way now? Oh,
they clearly do. They're like, the comments are always about that. They're like, whoa, it's like people are so programmed now just to keep 6 feet apart that when they see people up close like that they have a physical reaction. There's a lot of that going on. As for me, I don't have that reaction at all, because I'm seeing, by the time I really get to that, and I'm thinking about the painting and the emotion and the scene, I'm really in the sort of Baroque composition world of it all, which is, the elliptical angles and the sort of, tilting space and all the stuff that I'm thinking about, which has nothing to do with social distancing at all. But yeah, I think that is definitely a reaction people are having. And I think the paintings have been used in, as in articles and Dutch newspapers and such for social distancing.
I love it. A Dutch newspaper is like, this is the perfect example of what we can't do anymore. or this is what we're going to go back to.
Remember touching? Remember
Yeah,
mosh
remember
pits?
this.
It's a problem for me because I have some new things coming down and I can't get models to come and pose. I'm
Right.
setting up a whole thing with like SWAT team guys. I got all this equipment for them, and like all I can get are couples to pose together and then string them together in Photoshop, which is probably what I do anyway. But I'm struggling with my next piece because no one can wrestle with each other in my studio.
You touched on it a second ago, but what the project that you did in all the state capitals of which is predominantly the North Midwest battleground states, is that something that you just did on your own, or was that associated with anything?
Yeah, it's something I did on my own.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been doing other things on my own on this topic. It was the kids in cages behind grates, stuff like that. So I did that in the Midwest. I thought the Democratic Convention was going to be in Milwaukee, so I put up a bunch in Milwaukee last summer.
Do you want to maybe just describe a little bit more detail?
Yes, please.
When you say kids and grates, it maybe needs a little further explanation as to what it is exactly that you're doing, as opposed to just walking up with children in small cages.
So basically, what you are these trompe l'oeil sort of installations. So it'll be like a window or a grate or a vent or something like that would normally be part of a street, furniture, like that would go on the side of a building or on a door, like door, the windows and doors, like those square windows and a door. But my paintings, and they're actually sort of 3D because they're done on different levels, so they actually have some physical presence to them. And then I paint like a kid behind a grate, usually a kid of with big sad eyes or something like that, or always a kid who's non-white, because the kids at the border is really what it was about back then. And then I called them Sanctuary, Is It Safe? #Sanctuary, #Is It Safe? So that's what I did last summer. I do variations. Maybe I did some Do Not Enter signs. I probably did some in LA when I was there for Beyond the Streets. I was still, I was working towards that by then. I was doing more of the hands on ledges back then, but the trompe l'oeil stuff. But that was still with the immigrants being hunted down and not knowing if they were safe. So I did a bunch of those in what they call the Fashion District in LA. And then this summer, I took it just to Is It Safe? I had these little kids with big eyes, non-white kids, behind chicken wire, and I put them in Do Not Enter signs in that white oblong in the middle of the Do Not Enter sign. So it says Do Not Enter, and this kid behind a grate, and I put them in all of the Midwestern swing state capitals. So that's Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. This was our family vacation, by the way. So we went from Harrisburg to Columbus to Indianapolis to Des Moines to Madison to Lansing. Fortunately, my in-laws live in Illinois, so we left the kids with them and we drove to Madison, my wife and I. So we had like the best thing ever, which was like a night alone. And then we just hung out in Madison, where she knew a bunch of people. I put up a bunch of work there. Madison is a very cool place. And every one of these places fucked the protest. Every one was fucked. And I didn't really know that places like Indianapolis or Columbus, Harrisburg, I guess it's been going on everywhere, but we didn't really know about it. So there were boarded up windows, crazy graffiti everywhere, saw some empty statue plinths. There was one in Madison. It was some Union soldier they tore down. They didn't care. They just fucking tore it down. It was awesome. It was everywhere. So, and, everything was pretty much like all the flowers were replanted. Everything looked back to normal. But, I'm out there sort of prowling the streets looking for places to put my things up. And you really felt like this is just a little interlude and more is coming. And, sure enough, I think, with these ICE agents, the secret police, whoever those guys are coming in, it's going to be exploding again, all these places.
From our point of view here in Britain, as always, we're watching, and it is, you guys just take it to a new level.
Doug, what's very fascinating is that what you really start learning as an American during this time period is that how big our country is.
Your country's huge.
Because I think about Portland and what's going on in Portland, and it's like, it feels so far away from me right now. It just feels so far. I mean, it's like, it's hard to find out information too, even though we live in a super, hyper information age. But it's just like, it's becoming so localized in all these places that it's starting to become almost hard to follow what's actually happening. That's why it's what's fascinating about Dan and you traveling all around the country, seeing some kind of continuity is fascinating.
Again, it was not what I expected, which is the best part about everything I do. It's
Right.
like I have one intention, and then it just turns into like a whole new revelation, which will undoubtedly go into the, whatever cogitations I have about what's coming next in my life. So, but right now I'm focused on the election for sure.
Right.
I guess as an artist, you've got the big ideas, and then you've got the restrictions of how do you make the biggest impact that you can possibly make. Are you planning on just taking this right through?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna keep with it, but like I said, things evolve. Like this is sort of the do not enter signs were an easy, cheap, because I pay for these things and I don't have great resources. It was cheap and easy, and something I could sort of fold into the family road trip. Right? It's not cool to leave your kids in a car while you go do felonies. So,
well, when you put it like that,
well, I've learned that from experience. I don't want to get into that because that was a fucked up thing that happened to me. But yeah, you don't want to have your family involved when the cops swoop in on you. So cops don't like that. So yeah, we park the car. The kids go to some place with my wife, and then they come back after I'm done. We have a system with that. But yeah, I'm really interested in Staten Island here, which is someplace I've never really worked in. So I'm probably going to do something there. It's a Republican stronghold. A lot of cops live there.
Do the kids get what you do?
No.
How many are we talking about here? What ages?
We have two, and the older one, he just thinks it's normal. He's 8. He knows that what I'm doing is illegal, but he thinks it's a normal thing. He doesn't think like it's anything cool or anything like that. He's just like, that's what that dad's doing, that thing he's doing, because he's been all around the world with me his whole life watching it go on, so he doesn't think anything of it at all.
Give him a few years.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be 16. I think it'll be later on. It'll be like 25, 26. He'll just go, shit, that was cool. That was really cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so happy if he was turned into a graffiti artist or something like that. But what could I say?
I don't think you'd have a leg to stand on with that one.
But the stakes of getting caught now are just ridiculous compared to when I was being an idiot back then. So.
I guess that's what I was curious about, like what your feeling is with this new Handmaid's Tale-esque police force that Trump has, put out in major cities. More hesitant than ever to be on the street, or are actually you more urgent to get on the street?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Is like I'm not a practical guy. I'm not a rational person. So yeah, it is definitely making me think I got to be doing more, which is like why I want to go to fucking Staten Island, which is not a cool idea. I have my strategies, and my installations take under a minute, and I have my little worker outfit on and all that stuff, but it's not cool to be in Staten Island, their house, doing that kind of thing. But yet it seems like something that needs to be done. So I can actually do these at night, which I've never been able to do any of my stuff at night before, because these are just putting a sticker on a sign, which is actually a little difficult, but I could do it at night. So I'm thinking about that.
A kind of practicality, a speed that you can operate at now that maybe wasn't there before.
Yeah, I want to, I'm definitely working with those secret police guys. That's my next thing,
Yeah.
Like I've been collecting gear here for photographs. I don't know if you've seen the Civil War cosplay. So I have like the Antifa guys. I have all the stuff that the opposition wears, but I want to pick up SWAT gear and have them fighting and doing mosh pits and things like that. Dog piles of protesters and secret police and cops and press and all that. I did one painting of all these guys in hoodies having a riot, and this is sort of the outgrowth of that. So that's what I'm working on. But like I said, I can't get people to pose right now. So, but if anyone's listening and they have any of that gear, I need tactical gear. Anything you got, I'll return it to you. I'll pay for postage. I need everything: vests, boots, duty belts, anything you got. I would love to have it, and I'll borrow it for like a month and give it back.
Usually people plug like a new book or, an upcoming show, and you're like, I just need some riot gear, please.
Hey, this seems like a good time to ask for this.
Is street art still punk? Is street art punk?
Yeah, good question.
Like I said, like I don't like to comment about like my pet peeves about things like that, but I think it's becoming more transgressive than it was again. I think like, especially with the like these murals and the sort of spontaneous graffiti of all the Black Lives Matter protests and the effect it's all having. I mean, that's what they're exciting is the reason for defending the courthouse in Portland is the graffiti. So there is a new wrinkle in this. How punk is it? It's pretty fucking punk if, it's getting the secret police on everyone's ass. As far as what I do, it's, I don't know. I'm not the one to say things like that. Like, I know there's like people around who are better at that than me. So I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe.
For a punk, that was a very diplomatic answer.
Yeah.
The thing is like, like all the commissioned mural stuff, muralism is nothing to do with what we're talking about. That's a whole other world. The stuff where the people get permission and they work it out with the community and all that. That's another thing entirely. That was never punk. Okay. That was something else. And I know some people call that street art, but if the stuff like the people, I mean, I have pictures of it from all over the Midwest. They're just like spontaneously millions of people, thousands, whatever, are coming out and doing all this stuff all over the place. And it felt very punk to me because it was very fuck you.
And I really hope, Dan, that it was a minivan that your wife was driving.
SUV. We have an SUV with a bike rack on the back and a big, the shell on top and all that stuff.
I just thought like there'd be something very punk rock with the family picking up dad as he's doing illegal street art in a minivan. And I had this wonderful story of the four of you. Some
guy, a Toyota dealer, bought a bunch of my paintings, and I was just like, give me that minivan. He was like, nah, it's easier. I'll just pay you. I was like, that was my chance to get one. They're great. I love them. They're big. I got a bunch of tools. I have that ladder, and it's, got the bikes and the strollers, and we have 2 porta potties.
So should we finish that shout out with, if anyone has any riot gear or a minivan
or access to a cheap, well-maintained minivan, Dan Witz in Brooklyn, New York is looking for. So, Dan, we have to ask, because we've had a pandemic that's changed everybody's lives this year. Was there anything that you had canceled or changed or altered that sort of put you in a whole different mindset?
Sure, life as usual has been canceled for sure. I had some nice things, shows and cool stuff going on that was canceled, and like I'm in this art fair in Paris, and I love going to Paris. I'm sure we're not going because I don't think they're letting Americans go anywhere in October.
We can't go.
Yes. Yeah, we can't even go to Canada now, I think. So, yeah, plenty of that, and I'm sure there's, some economic problems, of course. I have to ask my wife, but, we seem to be doing okay. And I got to really double down and do that Trump rally during the pandemic, and it was during that really lockdown period where, we were here. So there was a really intense like month and a half before we could actually go to the park and, sit outside, that I focused in on that thing. I wouldn't say it was a good thing because none of this is good, but, I did make the best of it.
Well, Doug, I feel bad. It's 9:30 for you.
Yeah, I think we covered some good ground. Is there anything else that you feel that we should?
Is there a plug? You want to plug on?
No, not the plugs. Is there any topics that you wanted to talk about further? Fuck the plug.
No, he wanted to. His minivan, tactical gear, and
you've had enough plugs.
I think it'd be awesome if I got some tactical gear. I mean, I think that would be so cool because there's like gloves. You need elbow pads, knee pads. There's like all these crazy different masks they wear. They have these special helmets, with these visors, and like I can get it on eBay, and I don't, it's a worthy thing to invest in, but I bet they don't even have it all sold out because all these protesters are gearing up and they need that stuff.
Talk about a list you'll be put on if you buy it.
I went to a law enforcement place in Long Island, and I was like, really? So you just sell this to anyone? And I was telling her I'm a photographer. I'm using it for a photo shoot. And she's like, yeah, you're right. We really don't do that because anyone could just dress up like a cop and then they could get away with whatever, right? I think some of those militias, they're just going to the store and buying all the shit so they look like ICE, soldiers or whatever those guys are. So those militias are not legal. So yeah, she seemed to, once I brought it up, she seemed a little more concerned about it.
The special agents that are arresting people around the country look like dudes who might have gone to a golf tournament earlier that day. They don't look like anything special.
Yeah, and they got this gear that someone just bought. It's not army issue stuff. So yeah, it's expensive though. It's really expensive.
Do you know who just bought it? Taxpayers. That's who bought it.
Hey Doug, you know what? Fuck you and your National Health Service. Dan, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Yeah, that was fun, guys.
Hey Doug, you have a good time over there in London.
Yeah.
You enjoy that minor freedom while you can.
Here's a little bit more of Evan and myself discussing Jerry Saltz's take on Banksy. Yeah, so he called him a political cartoonist and illustrator. And it was just like, do you know what, man? You go to the Waldorf Hotel in Bethlehem and tell me that's that's the work of a cartoonist. Look at Disneyland when he put the Guantanamo Bay figures right in the middle of it. Tell me that's the work of a cartoonist or an illustrator. £2.2 million raised for a hospital in Bethlehem. Tell me that is the work of a cartoonist.
I don't buy that at all. But I don't see the insult in being a political cartoonist. And it's surprising that he would say something like that, because I think anytime you get into that discussion of categorizing whether something is art or not, you're already fucked, and it's already a stupid argument, and it's already an elitist argument for somebody who champions being this kind of outsider, renegade, rebel of the art world. Well, somebody who considers themselves to be a rebel and renegade of the art world to then use the same structures of the world that he's trying to critique all the time to critique the most famous artist in the world, who has done more to raise awareness of world issues than any artist besides Ai Weiwei I can think of, and maybe to a certain extent like Jenny Holzer, Barbara Kruger. It seems kind of problematic, doesn't it?
It's intentional though.
Of course, it gets a rise out of people like you and I. Yeah,
it's like you say, it's just this guy is, proclaiming to be outsider, proclaiming to be something else, and it just becomes this completely inherited voice of the establishment. Yeah. And I guess you just feel like you would expect more from someone that's supposed to be kind of like batting for our team. And
Banksy poses a huge existential threat to every person whoever has existed in this established art world and art criticism world, because he can be whatever he wants to be on his terms at any point and at any time, which means that you can't get a hold of him. He'll do like the London Underground takeover, which is back to his roots, and then he'll sell a painting for £2.5 million for charity, taking that painting off the wall of his hotel in Bethlehem on the Palestinian side, something that drew more awareness to that issue than probably a New York Magazine article ever could. No offense to New York Magazine. I love the magazine. I think Banksy poses a threat because he's unidentifiable in so many different categories besides who he is, that I think people it poses just too many issues for a serious criticism, I guess.
It's not like he's just spent his entire career like capitalizing off the plight in Palestine. There's something different about when you see artists kind of exploit poverty porn, and it becomes an entire career just looking for places of deprivation so that they can use that to just be like, oh, look at the sad people. And Banksy's like, he's continually tried to do his best to educate people and to invest in these areas in certain ways that he can, without it kind of crossing too many political lines. And I just think if you're putting money into building a hospital in an area, literally nobody can say anything bad about that.
Even for Juxtapoz, I've interviewed Banksy before, or we've had him on the cover. It's even hard for us to kind of define what our relationship is to his art and his brand, because he is so many things to so many different people and doing so many different things that labeling him as something is wrong and it doesn't work. So even if you wanted to say he's not an artist, he's a political cartoonist, whatever that is, like it's so wrong. But even if you were to call him a street artist, it's wrong. So it's
He knows what he's doing. It's underhanded, and it's an attempt to try and like put him in this little box that is beneath the artist that he's currently reviewing and admires.
I think there's that critique is like it's supposed to be like a critique of populism, right? Because Banksy's so popular and speaks for so many people who might not understand how the art world works, and he's kind of exposing that if you look deeper into it. So it feels almost like it's kind of like this weird critique where it's like the extreme left and the extreme right kind of start meeting, at points. It kind of feels like that a little bit. Like you're trying to compare Banksy's kind of MO with how the far right kind of treats stuff. I don't know. It's a weird critique. I don't get it.
Thanks again for tuning in, and thank you to Dan for letting us use that little bit of the interview he said was strictly off the record. I promise we wouldn't do that to him without checking first. We'll be back with you guys in just a minute. Till then, stay safe, look after each other. Peace.